What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. And today I thought it would make for an interesting topic in video to look at Barry Trot, how he went from a beloved former head coach of the Nashville Predators to basically plummeting them into the worst spot in the NHL currently. So this is the Barry Trot's tenure. On February 26, 2023, the Nashville Predators announced that their only general manager in franchise history, David Poile, was stepping down after a legendary career. In a non-traditional hockey market in Nashville, he had made the playoffs 17 out of 25 seasons, including 8 straight appearances until that 2023 season, won the Western Conference in 2017, and a President's Trophy in 2018. Drafted a bunch of Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers, and elite players like Ryan Suter at 7th overall in 2003, as well as Shea Weber in the same draft at 49th overall. Pekka Rinne was an 8th round pick. Patrick Hornquist was the last pick in the 2005 draft. You got Roman Josi at 38th overall in 2008. Ekholm and Craig Smith both in the 4th round of the 2009 draft. This man had all this success despite only drafting in the top 5 of the NHL draft 2 times, David Legwand back in 1998 and Seth Jones in 2013. Also pulled off one of the greatest trades in the 21st century, that being the Martin Erat for Philip Forsberg deal. You got Mike Fisher for a 1st and a 3rd round pick, as well as doing the Weber for Subban deal. Oh yeah, even though Poile never won a Stanley Cup, Barry Trotz had a lot to live up to. Hey, who would you rather have succeed your only general manager in franchise history than your first coach in franchise history, who after a slow start, which every single expansion team has unless you're the Vegas Golden Knights, made the playoffs 7 out of his final 10 seasons, had 4 100-point seasons, then shortly after left to go to the Washington Capitals, win a Stanley Cup in 2018, and smash expectations as the New York Islanders head coach. So yeah, this man had kind of been working hand in hand with David Poile for 15 years, then went to Washington and learned what it took to win a Stanley Cup, worked alongside Lou Lamoriello for better or worse, and he had 4 months under Poile to fully understand how to run a hockey organization until he fully took over. And Poile also did very right by Trotz by setting him up for the future at the 2023 deadline, getting a 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th for Tanner Janelle, as well as shipping out Matthias Ekholm and getting a 1st round pick, as well as Reed Schaefer, and getting a 2nd round pick and moving off Mikael Granlund's 2 years at $5 million, which was looked at as a bad contract back then. So naturally, everybody thought that the Nashville Predators were heading towards either a full rebuild or some heavy retool, considering they've been a solid team for like 20 years and had just sold at the deadline, and maybe get back in contention in 2 to 3 years, considering Saros and Forsberg were only like 28 years old, which was only enforced by moves like dumping half of Ryan Johansson's contract for the signing rights of Alex Galchenyuk, just shedding money. In the draft, again, Poile is still technically general manager at this time. They're taking high upside swings. They draft Matthew Wood at 15th overall, who's a 6'5" winger that was 1 point off point per game at the college level at UConn on not that good of a UConn team, and was expected to go between like 13 and 23 and had one of the highest ceilings in the draft. As well as with the Edmonton Oilers pick, selecting Tanner Molendyk at 24th overall, a solid offensive defenseman that was more so in like the 35 to 40 range. So yeah, things were looking bright in terms of the future of the Nashville Predators. They had the 10th ranked prospect pool according to Elite Prospects. People had them roughly in that range, considering the fact that they had the best goalie prospect in the NHL in Yaroslav Askarov, who at 21 years old had a 9.11 in the AHL. Joakim Kamel had came over at the end of the season, had 13 points in 14 games played in the AHL as a 2022 draftee. They had, of course, Luke Evangelista, who was dominant in the OHL with 111 points, and then 41 points in 49 games played in the AHL. Molendyk and Wood they added in the 2023 draft, and then Fedor Svechkov, as well as Zachary LaRue. It was a pretty damn good prospect pool with one superstar. If they tanked for another year or two and got that defenseman or forward top-end prospect, this was a pretty elite prospect pool. And then just the day before free agency, they decide to buy out Matt Duchene's final 3 years at $8 million, incurring a cap hit the following year at $2.5 million, then $5.5, then $6.5, then 3 years at $1.5. And Duchene, while not worth maybe $8 million at the time, was still a pretty damn good player, 2 years removed from an 86-point season. In the prior season, had 51 points in 71 games. So we all thought that, oh, they're really entering this rebuild and retool if they're willingly moving off Duchesne, who still was like a $6 to $7 million player. However, that wasn't really the case on July 1st as they go out and sign Ryan O'Reilly on a 4-year deal at $4.5 million. They sign Luke Shen on a 3-year deal at $2.75 million, as well as Gustav Nyquist on a 2-year deal at $3.15. So yeah, although these weren't like long-term deals like the following offseason, it still was a little bit confusing that they would buy out Duchesne, who is still a pretty good player, and then go get also veterans that are going to take spots from young guys. But hey, we're trusting Trotz's vision, and it's the start of the 2023-2024 season, and they actually stunk out the gate, going 5-10 in their first 15, but then flipped the switch and went 13-5 in their next 18. And fun fact, just dorky stat here, they didn't have an overtime or shootout loss until game 36. Just very weird. From that point on, they basically just played around 500 hockey until mid-February, and we're still only like 3 to 5 points back of the Western Conference wild card. And after an embarrassing 9-2 loss, Barry Trotz did the absolute unthinkable. He banned the team from being able to go to the Sphere to watch U2 when they headed to Vegas on their road trip. You knew this team needed some kind of wake-up call, and not being able to see Bono apparently was that wake-up call that they needed, as they would beat the St. Louis Blues, the Vegas Golden Knights, the Kings, the Sharks, the Ducks, the Senators, the Wild, the Avalanche, overtime loss to the Montreal Canadiens. They would beat the Buffalo Sabres, the Jackets, overtime loss to the Minnesota Wild, the Jets. They would beat the Kraken, the Sharks, the Panthers, the Red Wings, and the Vegas Golden Knights. Again, they had an 18-game point streak, going 16-0-2. This propelled the Nashville Predators from 4 points out of the wild card to then 10 points into it, and they cruised into the playoffs. We'll talk about this more throughout this video. This 18-game point streak might have actually been a curse in disguise for the Nashville Predators going forward in Barry Trotz. Because then in the playoffs against the Vancouver Canucks, when they didn't even have Thatcher Demko, they played Artur Shilovs, who had like 9 games of NHL experience. They would go on to lose in 6 games. And while not being close to a contender and only really making the playoffs because of that 18-game point streak, the 2024 offseason came, and Barry Trotz is ready to be hyper-aggressive. So up first, he attached a 4th-round pick to Ryan McDonagh in his 2 years at $6.75 million to Tampa Bay Lightning, and in return got a 2nd and a 7th-round pick, despite Ryan McDonagh being fantastic that season and a big reason why they made the playoffs. For the 2024 draft, he ended up trading Jesse Kiskinen and a 2nd-round pick for Andrew Gibson. Let you know how that move aged right now. Jesse Kiskinen had 44 points in 46 games this year in Liga at 19 years old. Meanwhile, Andrew Gibson is still a promising defenseman prospect, but I probably would rate Kiskinen higher at this point, and again, attach the 2nd-round pick to Kiskinen. In the 2024 draft, though, it goes pretty solid. He gets Yegor Sorin in the 1st round, who was about mocked to go around there, as well as Teddy Stiga in the late 2nd round, and he was not expected to be available there. He was expected to be like 30th to 45th overall. And then on July 1st, he goes absolutely ham, signing Marchessault to a 5-year deal at $5.5 million, Stamkos 4 years, $8 million, and Brady Shea 7 years, $7 million. Start with the actual decent deal that hasn't aged that bad. Marchessault won the Conn Smythe in 2023, as well as having 42 goals in 2024, and it was only a 5-year deal at a relatively low cap hit for a guy that was going to be a good top 6 forward the next 2 to 3 years. Stamkos in the moment was pretty goddamn stinky, as he had 40 goals, 41 assists the prior season. Half of that came on the power play on a loaded Tampa Bay offense, and he was 34 years old. And then last and certainly least, Brady Shea got a 7-year deal at $7 million. He had been an okay second pair defenseman on the Carolina Hurricanes, but was kind of just in this perfect situation, a Rod Brind'Amour system, and he was 30 years old. And then to finish off July 1st, 2024, a day that will live in infamy, he also extended UC Saros on an 8-year deal at $7.74 million, basically confirming that he was the starter of the foreseeable future in Nashville, leaving 21-year-old Yaroslav Askarov in complete limbo about his future. Now, I wasn't in the negotiating room, but obviously in a perfect world, you would have liked to sign Saros to a 4 to 6 year deal and at least told Askarov, we'll reevaluate then. If you develop well, you'll be able to take over as a starter, but it is possible that Saros' camp only wanted a 7. 8-year deal. And yeah, it wasn't long until he was packing his bags, as 53 days later, he was traded to the San Jose Sharks for late 2023 first-round pick David Enstrom and a 2025 Vegas Golden Knights first-round pick. It was an understandable package to get, given the leverage that Nashville had, but yeah, 2 late first-round picks equivalent in value, maybe Enstrom was even a little bit lower than that at that point, was kind of crappy for, again, arguably the best goalie prospect in hockey. In Barry Trotz's defense, he did not draft Yaroslav Askarov. That was, of course, David Poile back in 2020. He was worrying about a different goalie from Russia, that being Ilya Sorokin, having him come over to the New York Islanders. It's not really his fault, but you can still somewhat blame him for handling it a little bit poorly in terms of the communication, in terms of going so long-term with UC Saros, and in terms of kind of committing to the current core instead of that next generation. So another move that signaled that he wanted to win now is he attached a 3rd and a 6th round pick to dump Cody Glass in his remaining year at $2.5 million. But hey, at the end of the day, this was a playoff team last year. I had them safely in the playoffs. Other people safely had them in the playoffs. I never thought that they were a legit contender, but yeah, they were a team that was pretty goddamn old. Most of their best players were over the age of 28 outside of Luke Evangelisto. What could possibly go wrong? And they were god-awful. They started out 4-9-1 in their first 14 games and 7-16-6 in their first 29, putting them in dead last in the NHL behind the Chicago Blackhawks, behind the San Jose Sharks. The team could not catch a break for the life of them, and they were very, very unlucky, having a .969 PDO, which is the combination of save percentage and shooting percentage, which is easily the worst in the NHL. And as for how the new players were performing, it was pretty goddamn bad. Marchessault only had 15 points in 29 games. Stamkos, 7 goals, 14 points in 29 games. Brady Shea, 9 points in 29 games, as well as Evangelista not taking a step. Gustav Nyquist, after 75 points, had 10 in 28 games. UC Saros, after signing that big deal, was actually one of the few positives, as he had a .908 despite the team just being a total shit show. In fairness, I emphasize the unlucky nature of this team, as in that stretch, they had the 19th best expected goals percentage, so they were below average, but they weren't the worst team in the NHL. Instead of any big changes, he would just make a bunch of minor moves, like trading Scott Wedgwood to Colorado Avalanche for Eustace Annunen and a 6th round pick. Wedgwood would post a .917 with Colorado Avalanche. Meanwhile, Annunen would have an .888. He did a swap of Alex Carrier for Justin Barron. That did not exactly go as planned, as well as Parsonian to the Colorado Avalanche for a 3rd round pick. Perfectly fine with that one. They eventually did stabilize and would go 14-14-1 until the deadline, where they had basically no choice but to trade pending UFA Gustav Nyquist. Gustav Nyquist, unfortunately, was like the embodiment of the fall off, going from those 75 points to when he got traded from the Nashville Predators. He only had 21 points in 57 games, but they were still able to get a 2nd round pick from the Minnesota Wild. Another kind of weird move where he does not prioritize the future. He trades Luke Shen, who he signed a year and a half ago, and Tommy Novak, who was only like 27 years old, for Michael Bunting, in a 4th round pick. Bunting is an expiring player, but again, not opting for futures or prospects now, and Bunting does carry a solid cap hit of $4.5 million. Thankfully, after this, they do begin to stink it up again, going 9-14-1 and finishing with the 3rd worst record and actually being closer to the 2nd worst team than the 4th worst team. Remember how I said UC Saros was the one positive to start the season, those first like 19 games? That flipped. He had an .888 the rest of the way to bring his save percentage to an .895. And it wasn't just him. Don't get me wrong. The defense score was not good. He probably gave up on the season at the end, but he had a -7.4 goals saved of expected, which was one of the worst in the NHL among starters, as well as -3.8 goals above replacement, according to Evolving Hockey. As for the rest of the team, Forsberg and Marchessault were really the only ones that played to the level that you expected. At the end of the season, it was announced that Roman Josi had been dealing with POTS that stemmed from a big hit collision. And at 35 years old, that is definitely not ideal, but hopefully he can make a full recovery. It's an absolutely brutal season, but hey, at least the Nashville Predators can now actually get a direction. Whether it's a heavy rebuild, heavy retool, we can actually make changes, get younger now, move off some of the old guys, trade one of Ryan O'Reilly, trade one of Marchessault. We're getting probably the 3rd overall pick, maybe even the 1st overall pick, and we can look ahead to McKenna in 2026, DuPont in 2027. Nope, they can't have nice things even in the draft lottery. lottery as they fall from the 3rd overall pick to the 5th as the Islanders jump to 1, Utah jumps to 4, which only had a 29.5% chance of them falling to 5. But hey, if there's a draft to fall from 3 to 5 in, it is definitely this one, as it was kind of interchangeable between Frundell, Martone, and Desnoyers. You're still going to get a high-level player. Basically, all of those guys outside of maybe Desnoyers have legit star potential offensively. They end up going with Brady Martin while James Higgins and Porter Martone were still on the board. And don't get me wrong, I easily could be wrong, eating my words in 5 to 10 years from now, but the consensus was that Brady Martin, he is kind of a Sam Bennett, an awesome future second-line center, but not that serious difference maker, playmaker that the Nashville Predators badly needed. The Nashville Predators prospect pool after they lost Askarov was a lot of quantity, not a lot of top-end quality. They needed that true potential game breaker that a Porter Martone or James Higgins could have been. Also in the first round, they get Riker Lee and Cam Reed. I was actually very high on Riker Lee. I thought he was like one of the most underrated prospects in this draft. And Barry Trotz did as well. He was projected to go like 35 to 45, and he snagged him at 23rd. Also went a little bit bold at 35th overall, going with Jacob Rombach, who is a 6'6" defensive defenseman, who was in like the 50 to 75 range. And then after the draft, for some reason, traded a 4th round pick to get Eric Halla, who still had 1 year left at $3.15 million, and is 34 years old. His analytics dropped off a bunch. He only had 21 points last season. Again, Barry Trotz, why are you not letting your young guys play? Why are you trading assets for old guys that are not very good and overpaid? He's not done yet with the trades, as he trades for Nick Hague, gets a 3rd round pick, and gives up Lazon and Sissons, which on its face value doesn't look like that bad of a deal. Then he gives Nick Hague a 4-year deal at $5.5 million, which Nick Hague had only been playing 17 minutes the last season, never went over 18:40 a night, and wasn't that effective in it. Yes, he's 6'6", but he's 26 years old at this point. It's not like he's a 23-year-old guy that still has a lot of potential. This was a crazy contract in the Athletics model. Dom Luszczyszyn had him as a mid-$1 million player. I don't think that he's that bad, but again, on a really good Vegas Golden Knights team, he really never had that good of results. It's just wild to hand this guy a 4-year deal at 5.5. And then to close it out, he also signed Nick Perbix to a 2-year deal at $2.75 million. That's what I thought a Nick Hague would have got. That's a perfectly fine deal. Just been such a roller coaster of one move. We think that we're entering some kind of rebuild, retool. Then we get some kind of old guy. Then we do some kind of sell-off. It has just been up and down, up and down. It's so over. We're so back. They have not picked a lane, and we don't pick a lane. You just get stuck in no man's land. I wanted to wait towards the end to really break down the 2 deals where we thought that he was heading towards a rebuild and retool. That, of course, first being the Matt Duchene buyout. Buys him out, says, we'll pay you to be off your team. The last 2 years, he has 147 points in 162 games with the Dallas Stars. He has been hyper productive. Not saying he puts up that exact stat line on Nashville, but he would probably, again, be a $6.5 to $7.5 million player, buying him out and then spending that money on guys like Stamkos, guys like Ryan O'Reilly, was actually a good deal, but like Marchessault, Shea, absolutely insane. And then the second deal was dumping Ryan McDonagh and only moving up from the 4th round to the 2nd round. Ryan McDonagh, much like he was in the 2024 season, was one of the best defensemen in the NHL this year. And although plus minus is a rather irrelevant stat, he led the entire NHL in plus minus. He was an absolute monster yet again, well worth $6.5 million. And he only had two years left. I'm fully ranting right now. He only had 2 years left. Meanwhile, he used that money to basically give Brady Shea on the left side a 7-year deal at $7 million. Like, those 2 deals are just like so crazy in my opinion, just considering in that 2024 offseason, he decided to sign the absolute unction. We knew that those deals were ass. We didn't think that it was going to come to fruition in like the first season, but everybody knew that those deals were bad. And again, they were 4 to 7 year deals. At least that first offseason, it was 2-year deal, 3-year deal, 4-year deal to Nyquist, Shen, and Ryan O'Reilly. He put his chips in the middle. I know he didn't give up like 1st round picks or anything, but those deals are going to absolutely cripple this team the next 4 to 7 years. He cleared a bunch of money through Duchene and McDonagh and then just brought in inferior players. And again, he's going to be paying the Matt Duchene buyout $6.5 million this season and 1.5 after that. It is just insane how much of a fumble that was. Again, next season, I don't think that they're going to be that bad. They're not going to try to be bad. It's not like Barry Trotz is trying to enter some kind of rebuild, retool. Andrew Brunette is coaching for his job, and their analytics were pretty solid last year. So I don't think that they're going to make the playoffs or anything, but I think they're probably going to be an 80 to 85 point team or something like that, end up with the 9th to 13th overall pick, get an okay prospect, but not a serious difference maker. They are in peak no man's land. And again, right now on their roster, it's all guys over the age of 30. There's no proven good NHLers like under the age of 30. They have a solid prospect pool. It's ranked between like 11 through 16, but no serious difference maker unless Brady Martin, God bless him, becomes that. They don't have that next wave of elite talent. Go back to it, but that point streak really fooled this management group into thinking that they were much closer to potentially going on a deep Stanley Cup run than they actually were. If they actually just played 500 hockey the rest of that season instead of going on that streak, they probably somewhat start to tear it down in the 2024 season and are in a much better situation right now. Let me just say this also. I definitely understand the financial implications of going through a heavy retool, going through a rebuild in a smaller market, in a non-traditional hockey market like the Nashville Predators, but them just fully tearing it down again with the studs in 2026, 2027 that they could have gotten was a far better alternative than what they are going to have the next couple years of just being this mediocre team. Then probably the young talent's going to come in and keep them somewhat mediocre. They're never going to bottom out like they probably have to. But yeah, sadly, 2.5 years after Barry Trotz got announced as the next general manager of the Nashville Predators, the bad far outweighs the good right now. I'm not going to act like there's been absolutely no good, but unless this team somehow makes the playoffs or guys take a huge step in terms of the young core, again, where there's not a ton of guys even at the NHL level that are that young, he should be on the hot seat. I don't think he's going to get fired after next season. 3 seasons in, they're not going to go from like 25 years of Poyle into 3 years of Barry Trotz. They're going to give him time, but right now it is not looking good for the Nashville Predators. My New York Islanders, granted, we got the first overall pick. We got very lucky like that. We chose the lane of a retool. You got to choose and be decisive when you do it instead of these half-C moves like Barry Trotz has been doing. That's how you get stuck in no man's land. Let me know in the comments. What do you think about this video essay? Are there any other teams that you want to see me do these kind of video essays, kind of timelines on? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.